No one expected Ferrari to walk away from Silverstone with mixed feelings. Despite only Lewis Hamilton scoring for the team with a fourth-place finish, there were moments in the race that hinted at much more. In fact, Hamilton looked well within reach of standing on the podium. However, a few questionable decisions held him back. What's noticeable, though, is that Ferrari's recent changes are starting to show some effect. The improvements aren't just theoretical anymore. They've started translating into actual performance on the track. But here's the big question. Are these changes consistent, or are they just working under very specific conditions? This particular weekend was unpredictable for Ferrari. What looked like a promising setup quickly turned into an uphill battle. They were aiming to get one of their drivers into the top 2 positions on the grid, but it all ended with Hamilton managing P4. Charles Leclerc, on the other hand, took a bold step early in the race, one that didn't go his way. Leclerc believed that the dry conditions in the opening sectors would give him an edge if he switched to slick tires early. His thinking was that he could gain time before the rain arrived. It was a risky move. Unfortunately, the rain came down sooner and harder than expected. As a result, he got stuck behind George Russell and Ishaq Hadjar, 2 others who were also trying to gamble with their strategies. Hamilton, meanwhile, had a race filled with ups and downs. His speed looked decent and consistent, and at one point, he even had a real chance of pushing into the top 3. But as the race wore on, the tires gave up on him too soon. That late drop in grip meant he couldn't keep Nico Hülkenberg behind, who eventually celebrated his first ever podium in Formula 1. Hamilton's reaction after the race was one of frustration. Even though he appreciated the crowd and support, he made it clear that the team missed out on several chances. But despite the result, he admitted that things are beginning to improve. Hamilton's weekend wasn't all negative, though. There were some solid overtakes that showed just how skilled he remains, even in unpredictable conditions. One key moment came at turn 3, when Esteban Ocon and George Russell were locked in their own battle in the middle of heavy rain. Hamilton didn't hesitate. He made a sharp move and went past both of them, claiming those positions with confidence. Another impressive move came later in the race when he cleanly passed Pierre Gasly, which helped secure his 4th-place finish. But, even with these moments, Ferrari's overall picture remains uncertain. The car appears to have made progress, especially during qualifying sessions, but there's a lingering issue that hasn't been solved. The vehicle still behaves in a way that makes it hard to predict. The main problem is how narrow the performance window seems to be. According to Hamilton, the SF25 doesn't feel stable for long stretches. At times it becomes extremely difficult to handle. Leclerc had even more struggles. His race was disappointing, and he couldn't find the same pace as his teammate. Afterward, he admitted that Hamilton's setup seemed to work far better, and he hopes to learn from the data and driving approach to improve in future races. While it's frustrating for the Monegasque driver, he recognized that Hamilton had clearly extracted more from the same machine. He said the one bright spot from the race was being able to observe Hamilton's driving and learn from it. In a season where every small improvement matters, this kind of internal benchmarking could prove valuable. If both drivers can perform at Hamilton's level, Ferrari might soon become a bigger threat to the frontrunners, but only if they figure out how to keep their car consistent over a full race distance. Hamilton's performance, while stronger than expected, wasn't without flaws. During the free practice sessions, he didn't look particularly sharp. Yet, by race day, he managed to bring out much more from the car. That shows there's potential in Ferrari's latest upgrades, if both cars can perform similarly. But one thing was always going to make a big difference during the Silverstone race. The weather. Rain was constantly a threat, and it ended up shaping a large part of how the race played out for both Ferrari drivers. As Hamilton later explained, driving the SF25 was a real challenge. The car didn't give him the confidence he needed. It was unpredictable, especially at the rear. He described the feeling as frustrating, saying that when a car keeps reacting in ways you can't anticipate, it becomes nearly impossible to build rhythm. In his own words, it's like trying to construct something solid, only for it to keep falling apart again. Without that trust in the car, pushing harder becomes risky. That lack of confidence made him feel stuck, like he was trying to move forward but couldn't find any momentum. Ferrari fans, however, still found reasons to stay hopeful. The upgrade package introduced in Austria and then adjusted in Silverstone showed flashes of real improvement. In dry conditions, the car had strong pace, especially during practice and qualifying. Yes, Hamilton narrowly missed out on pole, losing time in the final corner, but the raw speed was there. If the rain hadn't changed the race so drastically, we might have seen a completely different result. That said, Ferrari's main area to improve isn't just car performance, it's strategy. Hamilton hinted that several decisions made by the team during the race were questionable. According to him, the first major call they made simply didn't work. He came into the pits in a strong position but returned to the track having lost multiple spots. Clearly, something went wrong in that sequence. After Hamilton's pit stop, the results were obvious. He entered the lane while sitting in 4th place, but came back out in 8th. He didn't hold back in expressing his thoughts afterward. He mentioned that the timing of that stop wasn't right, and that it allowed several competitors to jump ahead of him. The team needs to go back and look at the data to understand exactly what went wrong. It wasn't just bad luck, it was a mistake in decision-making, and it cost him a better finish. Once he was back on track, things didn't get easier. The timing of the weather changes meant Hamilton struggled on the fresh tires. He found it difficult to regain pace quickly, and in a few tricky corners like turn 3, turn 9, and turn 11, he lost more time trying to get the car under control. The low-speed sections of the circuit seemed to expose Ferrari's weakness even more, especially with tire degradation. One of the main reasons Hamilton wasn't able to push for a podium in the final laps was exactly that. The tires gave up, he couldn't maintain grip, and that especially hurt him in the tighter corners, where understeer became a big issue. At that point, he started locking up the front left tire more than once, making it hard to catch Nico Hülkenberg ahead, who eventually held on to his podium finish. This marks another strong weekend for the German driver. If we look back to Spain, where he pulled off a similar move on Hamilton for 6th place, it's clear Hülkenberg is making the most of his chances. For Ferrari, though, the takeaway isn't just about missing a podium. It's about needing to improve how they react during changing race situations. When a top driver like Hamilton loses 4 positions because of one poor call, something in the system needs fixing. Ferrari's leadership has a serious issue to reflect on after Silverstone. That first pit stop call for Hamilton wasn't just unlucky, it exposed a larger problem within the team's decision-making process. You can't afford to send your lead driver into the pits, only for him to come back out and find himself overtaken by 4 cars. That kind of mistake cancels out any performance gains you might have brought with upgrades. Team principal Fred Vasseur later explained that one major reason for the confusion was a technical failure. For almost half the race, the team lost GPS tracking for Hamilton. That meant they couldn't see his exact position on track and weren't able to properly guide him through strategy decisions. It's a reasonable explanation, but for a team like Ferrari, it's a big oversight. Losing track of your own car during a race isn't just unfortunate, it's unacceptable at this level. And just like that, Hamilton's long-running streak of podium finishes has come to an end. He had managed 11 consecutive top 3 results, even during the difficult seasons with Mercedes in 2022 and 2023. Now, that consistency is broken. Of course, this doesn't mean he's out of form, but it does show that Ferrari still has work to do before they can consistently challenge the top teams. Looking ahead to 2026, it's clear that this transition period is important. Hamilton hasn't joined Ferrari for comfort. He's made it clear that he's here with a goal. He wants to help build something that can compete for championships. Once the new regulations kick in, and that means everything from car design to team operations needs to be running at the highest level. With all the data now on the table, Ferrari's next big challenge is turning these upgrades into real, consistent results. There's no doubt that the car has improved. The updates introduced in Austria and refined at Silverstone show potential, especially in dry conditions. Free practice and qualifying made it clear that the SF25 can deliver strong performance when things are stable. But in mixed conditions, or under pressure, problems begin to show. Hamilton's off in the final corner during qualifying may have cost him pole, but the raw pace was there. That's encouraging. The next step is making sure the team's race strategy doesn't waste that speed. Even Hamilton hinted that the calls during the race weren't always right. Being undercut by multiple drivers during the pit window was a blow, one that better planning might have prevented. For Ferrari fans, there's a reason to stay optimistic. The team has made visible progress, and while there are still flaws, they aren't far off from finishing regularly in the top 3. The real test will come in races like Spa, where the weather can turn everything upside down. Hamilton may quietly hope for those conditions because on pure pace alone, the current Ferrari might still struggle to match McLaren's MCL39. However, when everything lines up, the setup, the weather, and the calls from the pit wall, Ferrari could well become the strongest team behind Red Bull, and even that gap might close soon. For Hamilton, though, being second best isn't the goal. He's not here to look back or slow down. He's here to make a statement, not just to prove something to others, but to show that this move to Ferrari wasn't a farewell lap. It was a new chapter, and with 2026 on the horizon, that chapter might just lead to something big.